Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy with another edition of our CEO series of interviews. And today I am joined by Hamish Brocklebank, the CEO and founder of Brox.AI. Hamish, welcome.
Hi, Lenny. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's good to have you. Now, we're going to keep this down to 10 minutes, but as part of our first question on your origin story, you do need to reference all the instruments in the back.
So, of course. So, are we diving right in then?
Diving right in. Yep.
We're okay. Well, so I was going to say, in a parallel life, I would not be in market research. I would be a rock star headlining Glastonbury. But sadly, one doesn't get everything in life. But it's a big passion of mine. So I was going to say I play all these instruments since starting Brox. Most of them are sadly gathering dust. But when I do have a moment, I do like to play everything from the ukulele back there to the bass to there's a mandolin just off camera that I started teaching myself last year. So it's a big passion of mine, and I would say it's good for the soul and to have a strong passion in parallel to one's work life.
Absolutely. Now, were you ever on track for the Rockstar?
No, sadly not. I play a lot, but I don't think I was talented enough to really go the whole way. Or maybe, I tried, but anyway, like many people. But yes, it was other things got in the way and such. But maybe one day, I hope that there'll be a second act. And maybe in 5 years or so, if the music industry still exists, we'll give it a go.
All right. We could have a whole other conversation about that. But so kind of segue, how did you go from, I want to be a rock star, but, don't necessarily have the talent, to being the CEO of a research company?
So I got into, I got into research completely by mistake. I think I find this with a lot of people in the research industry. We don't sort of end up there, but we sort of end up with this very interesting intellectual problem-solving space that I think draws a certain type of mind to it. And I basically got in there by mistake. So I've done a couple of tech startups. My first one was in the education space, a complete failure. But we did well for a bit. The second one, I set up an analytics company focused on the movie and entertainment business back in 2015, 2016, tracking social media when that was the big thing. Obviously still is quite a big thing. We built quite a successful product. And I mention that because even that, I sort of set up that company almost by mistake. I was in Los Angeles and I met a studio executive from Lionsgate in a bar in Santa Monica. And he was sort of saying, we want to track what people are saying on Twitter about our trailers. And as I had just wound down my last tech company, I was like, I can do that. No worries. And we ended up getting them as a client, not knowing anything about research, not knowing anything about the film industry either. And getting that contract and building out that product. And that became quite a successful product. We sold it to YouGov at the end of 2018. And I spent 3.5 years at YouGov helping them take that product and integrating it across with their other research products, predominantly their syndicated research products. And that's really how I fell into the market research space. And then I sort of bizarrely got quite hooked in it. And I sort of realized, and as someone, before we sold to YouGov, I will say I was a little dismissive of the value of market research, of the interest of market research. And once you get into it, you sort of find how valuable, how interesting it is, how sort of the progress that you can make, the sort of the technology, the sort of development effectively within it of what you can do is like extremely interesting. And that's basically, how I got into it. So no clear, it wasn't like I came out of university planning to do it. I did physics at university, always thought I was going to be probably a banker. But thankfully that never materialized, because that would have been a whole other life path, which I'm very glad never happened. But anyway, that's my sort of origin story, as it were.
Okay, very cool. And I think that variations on a theme for most, myself included. We just like, I'm doing this now. Oh, and this is really cool. Okay. So So let's talk about Brox then. So we got the origin. Uh, Obviously, your early stage company. Well, instead of me saying it, tell us about Brox and what's exciting and different about what you're doing now.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, and it might be worth just to talk a bit about the origin of Brox as well. So about 2 years ago, so my last startup was all text analytics predominantly. So it's machine learning, data science been a big focus. And then someone literally just pinged me and was like, "Have you seen this thing called GPT-2? It's quite interesting." And I started playing around with it and started realizing that I say that the obvious first order things, that it was going to have really big implications for analyzing data. Like, I mean, I think that's the biggest one. Most people are obviously looking at it from the generative perspective in terms of the output, but the semantic analysis was extremely interesting. And I initially went to the senior leadership team at YouGov, and I said, "Give me $10 million, and I want to go build basically something like Brox." Brox has evolved quite a lot since the initial nascent, and they sort of were quite dismissive, and I'm still very friendly with them. So a lot of people were quite dismissive of it initially, and then of course the world has changed. So they didn't give me the $10 million that I wanted, so I handed in my notice, and then we set up Brox, and we started out just focusing on this ability to, can we scale qualitative research, which is a lot of people are doing it, and it has a lot of massive implications. And even that alone, by the way, I think just in and of itself is extremely interesting. And the value of the insights that you can generate out of it is massive. But then where we sort of started to think through what are the implications of actually if you scale qualitative research to a massive scale. And then also what are the implications? One of the things that YouGov and many other companies do extremely well is the connected data piece, where you're connecting panelists with behavioral data and you're connecting panelists over a lifetime. And then what sort of happens when you have massive qualitative data, connected data piece? What are the future implications of that you can start building with LLM and LLM type tools? And so we've ended up building this sort of foundational tool that does all this qualitative analysis at massive scale. But the interesting things are what has come out of it. And so the first thing that came out of it was this brand tracker that we've built. So some different methodology, all based off tens of thousands of monthly qualitative interviews, where we're taking that. And the beauty of that is you can actually traditional brand trackers just are basically like maybe 16 lines through time. That's for a brand. That's like literally it. But the ability with the underlying data and the sort of cognitive capacity of the LLM to actually find out reasoning why people think this. And this is all based from, video interviews, qualitative interviews, because you get that richness. And then the next component we started playing around with was how predictive can all of that be? So, the obvious sort of predictions are, can we impute variables about panelists that we're missing? And obviously that's been like one of the holy grails in research for a long, long time. And it's really quite effective at that. And then, of course, what you just sort of imputing variables, but can you actually start to predict how they're likely to behave? Now, one of those ways is how are they likely to respond to a survey? So can you build, lots of people are attempting synthetic data, or not just attempting, very successfully launching synthetic data products. And then beyond that, not just how they would respond, but then the behave is obviously like, how do they behave in the real world? Now, we haven't quite got to that last, how do they behave in the real world? I don't think anyone's there yet. But how they respond to surveys, we have got to, how the brand, and then, we sort of see this component, and that's ultimately, what we're doing. But if I want to give the sort of macro second, third order pitch of why I think AI and market research is really exciting, is because market research has always traditionally been something that not just requires expertise and knowledge, which you need, but there's a lot of work. It's hard to write a survey question. The costs of getting stuff wrong are quite high. It's a very formal process. And so the idea of making market research the best way I can phrase it is casual. In the same way that if you think of Slack to email, the success of Slack is it's made communication within organizations casual. And so it's sped up the cycle of communication and information transfer, whereas email is this much more formal mechanism. I think that the LLMs and AI give this capacity to make the conducting of market research a more casual operation. So you don't just have you'll still have those market research teams doing the in-depth, deep stuff where you need absolute precision, but that casual analysis to allow more people to do it, to test more, to go faster, I think is the really big unlock that's going to happen, basically. Sorry, I may have got off tangent slightly there, but
no, that's okay. No, that's great. And I agree with you. I actually hadn't heard anybody put it quite that way around the casual component, and I think that is absolutely right. I translate that into engagement, right? So when we make it an informal process in terms of the respondent experience, something that is just more intuitive and what do I think about these brands? Well, blah blah blah. I expect that your engagement is very high within your panel. Is that
we do have a very high engagement. I'll also be blunt, we also pay our panel quite a lot. We give quite a lot of incentives, and for us, but yes, we do have, like all panels, we have these sort of concentric circles, but we have this quite large, like hyper engaged panel, and it's also interesting because traditionally, in my previous life, there were certain cohorts that were very difficult to engage with, and there still are. Like wealthy people are almost impossible to get good survey data on, but younger people we were really struggling with. And we're now finding, for example, that it's actually somewhat reversed. We actually find it a little harder with older audiences, and we have to put a bit more effort in. And younger audiences, we're getting tons and tons of really fabulous data from them. And it's also because the medium is more in line anyway with how they go about their daily lives.
Yeah, an Instagram-like experience, right? From that, the TikTok of research. Well, hopefully, maybe not quite that extreme, but so. All right, so you tackled a aspect of the research industry that has been relatively unchanged for a very long time and functions as currency with some very large companies that you brand tracking. You go to this company, they're the IBM of the industry, and you're turning that on its head. So, what have you found as far as clients that are open to this new alternative approach to brand tracking that you're offering?
In terms of the types of clients or how
so what's kind of the perfect client and use case that you're identifying now?
So, I mean, the perfect client is the one who pays up front and signs the deal quickly. But leaving that aside, so it's actually really interesting because we sort of find, there's, most of our clients are more tech-focused consumer brands products because they're sort of more they're generally faster to embrace AI, as it were, just because they're more in the thick of it. And that's more of our ideal client. And also as a startup, they're usually more slightly more collaborative in those sorts of elements, which we really like, which helps push our product forwards. But at the same time, we are starting to, and this is really only in the last couple of months, we're starting to find that the more old school clients, the more traditional clients are actually starting to they're almost more impressed by this technology because, if you're going to, the Magnificent 8 or is it Magnificent 7? Oh, anyway, one of the big tech companies, they've seen a lot of this. They have their own tools for other things. So they like it, they buy it. Great, but a lot of the sort of more old school companies we're seeing they really like it. The other interesting shift is we just brought on one client, a big streaming service. I'm not allowed to name them, sadly, but it's not the research, not yet exactly, but it's not the research team who have bought it. It's the business operations team, and we're starting to see, and going back to that sort of casual component from the client perspective. From the asking questions, getting answers back quickly, we're starting to see a lot of interest from the people who would in organizations be traditionally served by the market research teams, using us not so much not necessarily to replace what they're doing, but to sort of augment is how we think about it right now. And that's what we're seeing as a really interesting shift. Early days, but I think there's going to be a lot more of that as well.
We are absolutely seeing that in, I'm not sure when this is going to be published, but in the upcoming Grit report, or maybe currently published Grit report, we found exactly that, this restructuring of the insights user kind of ecosystem. So that is actually really gratifying to hear that you're discovering that, because we're seeing it as a trend. Now we're quantitatively taking this anecdote and recognizing the same thing. So yeah, huge implications for the industry, and also a huge, in my mind, and we're going to go over a 10 minutes audience. Sorry. It's making the pie bigger.
Yeah.
So, right, the opportunity for companies like Brox or any insights player to tackle new business issues with a different audience is just going to make it far more accessible and democratize insights, which just grows our annual turnover overall. So it's a shift, but I think it's a good shift that's going to help everybody.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, I was going to ask, what do you see as the kind of trajectory of change over the next few years? I think we just touched on a piece of that, but anything that you would add to, if we assume what we just talked about, broadening, democratizing of insights across different organizations, AI's unlocking all types of stuff. What do you think that looks like? Anything you'd add to that?
So I think the big one, and I know I've got to be careful here because I could talk about this for 30 minutes, is I think the thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about and should be thinking about are what are the second and third order effects that AI is going to have to industries that's going to impact research. So my big sort of hill I'll proverbially die on is that a lot of research is conducted around to support advertising. And I think I don't know whether advertising is going to die, but I think we like one world is you go online and it's going to be your LLM querying other LLMs, and you're not going to have to see any adverts. So that may not be, but the key thing is I think the world is going to be radically different in, say, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
What is not going to be different is that brands are still going to make stuff and sell stuff to people and want to sell stuff to people, which for me means that research is going to be more important than ever, because if you think about it, you can basically do research by dropping Facebook ads and dropping link, like that's effective. You can do whatever, you get the idea. And so foundational research is going to be more important than ever, but it's going to be used in a way, I don't necessarily know what that way is going to be like, but it's not going to be the same. And it's going to be very, very different from anything we see now. So you're going to need the insights, but the application of those, we're still trying to get our head around. I mean, I have some very deep ideas, but I don't want to give them away. Sorry, maybe not deep, but that's the wrong word, but out there ideas, I should say. But I think the thing everyone should be aware of is, like, how is the world going to change? And if it changes radically, how are you still going to, what's going to stay the same and what's going to change, basically? That would be my sort of add there.
Okay. I agree. I used to say that the world would look something like in Minority Report, hopefully without the negative components of that. But the walking through the mall, targeted, one-to-one individual advertising, big data would do that, not realizing we needed AI to unlock that possibility. And I still think that's probably directionally going to be about right. And again, hopefully without the kind of precognition and pre-crime and all the dystopian aspects of that. But that's another conversation. So last question. As a startup, in this rapidly changing market, tons of innovation, just every day it's something new, right? Especially in the world of AI. How do you keep up? Because you need to stay focused on, keep your eye on the prize, but yet by your very nature, you are embedded into this massively changing technological landscape. So how do you manage the two?
The answer is very difficult to keep up. The way we solve it is we are trying to build for what we think the future is going to look like in 2 years' time. And a simple example of this, LLMs. You're using LLMs. They're rate limited. They're very expensive. There's one. It's whatever. I think, and the way we operate is we have to operate on the basis of what happens when the costs go down, what happens when the LLMs get 100 times better or 10 times better, whatever you want to say, whether we get AGI or whatever. And you have to, the way we approach it is we have a vision for what the future is going to look like, and we are trying to build towards that future, as opposed to try and being constantly reactive. Now, if our vision of the future is wrong, it might invalidate everything we've built. But if we're right, we'll have a head start on everybody else. And that's the only way, honestly, you can sort of manage it, I find, from like an emotional perspective, because every day I open up my Twitter and there's a new Claude have just put out Opus, which is even better, and then Gemini and blah, 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 and Cohere just released the model, and in the market research world, there's 20 new innovations a day. So you sort of have to be slightly blinkered in one sense and not get distracted, but also realize that you're not building for today, you're building for 2 years down the line. And then, of course, the previous point, you then have to plug that in with how you think the macro world's going to change. So it's basically just try and keep your sanity, I think, is the answer.
Always a good thing. Always a good thing. Well, some would argue that, we're a little crazy to be in this industry to begin with. So, but all right, Hamish, brilliant, inspiring, good stuff. Really appreciate the conversation. Where can people find you?
So they can go on our website, Brox.AI, Brox.AI, or find me on LinkedIn or whatever. And we're always happy to give demos and always happy to have chats like this. Doesn't have to be about work stuff, always just bigger macro trends, always fun. Okay.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it. So go bug Hamish. Maybe he'll even play guitar for you at some point. So.
If it's late at night and I've had a whiskey or two, I could be tempted. But
okay, there we go. All right, well then, just have to plan for that. So expect some late night phone calls. Anyway, guys, thanks, audience. Thank you. We'll be back with another edition of the CEO series soon. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye bye.